Greetings. So I've been kind of laying low for the last couple weeks, and there's good reason for that. And let me explain. So basically, the ultimate goal is to show the system, people who are creating policy as well as those who are actually enacting it, that there is a solution for homelessness. And I kind of had this, somewhat roundabout way of working in one area in Portland and then expanding that to others. Well, in the interim, I've been able to open up a relationship with a shelter, a provider who's working with a number of shelters actually here in Portland. So I didn't want to talk about it until that kind of had gotten further along, and that's actually begun, and I'll talk about that at the end of it. So the short story is I'm actually kind of moving into pilot mode. So I'm not just working on clearing the streets area as I had planned with the Old Town project, but I'm actually working with people who are experiencing homelessness right now, trying to help them from a behavioral wellness standpoint. And the big thing that I want to talk about today is that there's a key reason why the current approach to mental health care really doesn't work in shelters. And let me get into some of those reasons. First of all, if you look at the traditional approach to therapy, there's this thing called rapport, which means basically the person that you're working with has to become comfortable with you. And even in traditional therapy approaches where the environment is, the absolute best, right? You're kind of going to an office, it's a one-on-one thing, you're maybe in an okay state of mind when you're getting there. Only every 3 out of 4 times, that rapport is not going to come there. So you're not going to be able to build rapport even under optimal circumstances. Now let's look at a shelter situation where potentially, the person who's in distress, you have people maybe trying to come to the shelter, trying to help them. The likelihood that they're going to be able to build rapport with these people using the traditional approach is highly unlikely. And when you add in the fact that, there is this, going to be inconsistency, a person may not be there from week to week or month to month, generally, decrease that likelihood. Also, another problem is that in mental health care today, there's a general workforce shortage. This is very, very well known. There's a huge unmet need out there. All kinds of people are needing, therapy and are not getting it. And those are, again, we're looking at the classical great situation. Okay, I'm sitting in an office, person's coming to me. Now you add in the fact that there is this, situation needed where you need to go to a shelter, which they tend to be pretty chaotic. And, it's not like this stable people just coming and getting temporary shelters. The people there who are attending, going to these shelters are struggling. So it's a pretty chaotic environment. The point being is that you have a practitioner who's looking at, okay, these are my opportunities. I can go to an office where I'm going to have a huge line of people because it's unmet need, or I can go to a shelter where it's going to be pretty chaotic. So the point being is that it's going to be pretty undesirable to say the least. Another issue is that we have to kind of talk about, kind of like what the content would be. Mental health care today tends to be a one-on-one situation where you're treating a person's disorder. Now we go back to the rapport issue. I mean, are you actually going to get far enough along where you kind of understand what this person's, main mental disorder is, what they're challenged with? No, I mean, it's highly unlikely that you're going to be able to kind of go with that traditional approach. You're going to be able to figure out what's going on with them and work with them over a course of weeks, which is another part of not only do 3 out of 4 times do we not build rapport, but typically it takes about 15 to 25 weeks for a person to make progress. Again, a situation that's highly unlikely to happen when you're in a homeless shelter. Another issue is just that kind of what would the content be in general? It's very much an ad hoc kind of almost artistic process, right? You could talk to, let's say you have an issue with depression. You could talk to 10 or 20 different therapists. You're going to get 20 or 30 different, approaches as to, how do you deal with depression? So, the problem is that the content as to what you actually would cover this person who's experiencing homelessness becomes really, almost impossible to determine. And finally, the absence of what is behavioral wellness is an issue. In general, and this is not a critique necessarily of practitioners, but in general, people learn coping mechanisms, right? You're not told that you're going to stop being anxious or you're going to stop being depressed or, your borderline personality disorder is going to go away. You're kind of told that they're going to continue to exist and you have to, understand how to deal with coping mechanisms, how to work around it, how to deal with it. It's a lifelong endeavor, and what do you do as a result? Well, of course, again, you look at a situation where that, person's experiencing homelessness, the likelihood that you're going to even, make some headway in that area, coping mechanisms, because whatever the challenges of that week, they're going to be on to something next. Are they going to be actually able to implement these coping mechanisms? It becomes a really far-fetched idea. And this is why emotional alignment is just so key. I have this emotions expert booth. If you know Lucy from the Peanuts comic, she has this doctor is in, and I actually created something like that, years ago, back in 2019, in fact. And the point that I'm making here is that I can, like literally within a space of like 2 or 3 minutes, get down to the core of one challenge that a person is dealing with and give them a nugget, something that they can work on. And that kind of, ability to, really quickly decipher what is going on in a person's life, kind of what is their emotional misalignment, and what do they need to do based upon the core process, which is also part of emotional alignment. This kind of structured system is to resolving conflict. But given all that, I'm able to very quickly give a person a one little nugget to work on. And now when you start to look at this in groups, these, these fixes, these nuggets that I give people, they're recurring items. So not only is a person who is in a group going to be able to learn about other nuggets, but they're also potentially going to be able to learn about stuff in their own life. The point being is that this all helps emotional alignments, behavioral wellness approach scale. It makes it really easy to help a whole bunch of people in groups. And you add in, of course, all the constructive language. Everything is meant to be helpful. It's really easy to talk about it in groups where traditional healthcare is really driven towards this one-on-one, do something in private. It's kind of stigmatized still and probably always will be. But really, so I'm excited about, being able to potentially demonstrate this at a shelter. I'm kind of in the middle of my pilot. We're just, just starting. It's going to take some to get it actually, integrated into the system, but that's what I'll talk about next. How is this pilot going? And how do you actually integrate emotional alignment into a whole population of people who are experiencing homelessness at a shelter? Talk to you soon about that.